All right, everybody, welcome to Optimal Self Conversations, where we talk to incredible people who, through adversity, grit, and persistence, are forging the path to being the best version of themselves. And they join us to give you the tools to do the same. You guys are in for an absolute treat today. And, it's funny because we do these and I say that kind of all the time, but you are going to meet Dr. Sabba, and let me say this. I'm going to say it to you this way. We're just going to say Miss Q because what she's doing in the world literally is going to change the lives of our children, our children's children. And I just want to read what she wrote before we get going in the conversations. And she says a statement. She said, "I stand firmly by the statement that no student should graduate feeling confused and unprepared for the world. And yet so many do. Like so many others, I walked in the professional world thinking to myself, I don't remember reading this in my textbooks." Those of you out there probably feeling the same way. It personally took me years to find my place in the professional world while learning how to navigate in rapidly changing society. And I know I'm not alone. It's time to start setting our students up for real success after graduation. When I read that the first time, and also knowing you and following along for the last few years, is that it is so true that not only are you saying that, but you are now stepping into the role of, I'm going to make some change. And so, man, thank you so much for being here. I mean, I can't even tell you. I know I said offline, I want everybody to know this. This is one of those conversations that I have absolutely been dying to have. And so thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me and for, helping to advocate for this message and for, students across all over.
All right. So our audience, again, we love to know the human, right? We see the movement and all people love to get behind those things. But tell us a little bit about your journey. Like where did it start and how did we get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's been a long one. I would say it really started for me when I think now back when I moved from London to California and I was 10 years old. And to kind of just, make a long story short, it was a really, really, really difficult transition. And a really big part of what made it difficult was losing my love for learning. It was being in California, we went from sort of a more public school environment, that was just sort of more that you didn't have as many textbooks and you had a lot more sort of experiential learning to a more private sort of a school experience that had a bit more of a religious aspect to it and things like that. And that was a big part of why our parents wanted to make the move. They didn't feel like we had the exposure to culture and religion in the way that, they were kind of hoping for us to have and to grow up with. So anyways, I felt like that transition was extremely difficult. And it really wasn't until I was 16 years old. And I was a relatively good student, but really when I was 16 years old, I remember just being so bored. I was in this 𝗡𝗵𝗄 program, just listening to like professors behind a podium all day long, reading from a textbook. Like it just was a really, really, it wasn't what learning felt like growing up. And so when I realized you could take the high school exit exam, I did that and I went to community college. And going to community college is really what I think was my first really big transformation because it gave me power back over my learning experience. It allowed for me to create my own schedule. Like I remember I used to spend hours just going through like the course catalog, really browsing the different courses I wanted to take. And a lot of everything that I did in my higher education experience was really guided by interest and my strengths and what people were highlighting I was really good at. And so the culmination of those experiences led me to decide to go into education. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go in education, high school, elementary. So I was actually doing internships in both areas. And the elementary level, I just had too many favorites, just super honest, like too many favorites. They were just so cute. And it was just very different. But what I really loved about working with high school students was helping open up different avenues for them that they didn't even know existed. Like, did you know you could pursue this path? Did you know that this is not the only way in which you can do something? Did you know that these are options that are available to you? And just watching their faces and just watching them go through that growth and being able to be somebody who could sort of be that intermediary between what you think is possible versus what is possible is something that just really brought so much joy to my life, and is something that I found myself really passionate towards. So I ended up being a high school social science teacher. Like I said, did really well in school, but I also happened to have graduated in 2007 with my master's and credential, got an amazing job my first year as a teacher. And then literally just like 2-3 months after that, it was the Great Recession. And one of the things that happened at education in that time, there were many budget cuts across a lot of areas, but one of the biggest ones was an increase in class size, which meant obviously a huge reduction in the number of teachers that are needed within a school. And while I was always really fortunate to find another position, I did this for about 5 years. It just was constantly changing schools 1 year after the next, 1 year after the next, spending your whole summer looking for a job. And it just really dawned on me like, wow, like this is not a sustainable way to like build a career. I'm never going to build a career if I have to keep moving every year. And it really just got me reflecting on the world of work, thinking about the things that I had been taught that just weren't working and were not actualizing in the way people had said growing up, and then reading about changes and really reflecting. And one of the most impactful books that I think had a huge influence on me was Linchpin by Seth Godin, where he really talked about this concept of understanding your unique strengths and your art. And it's interesting because going to college, understanding my strengths had really guided me in choosing things, but it wasn't something I was able to translate into being a professional. So I was great at doing it as a student, but doing it as a professional is a little bit different. How do you market yourself? How do you showcase yourself? How do you answer interview questions in a way that allows those strengths to come forward? Was something that I felt like I had to learn a little bit, and Linchpin really, really helped me craft and articulate what contribution I could bring to the table to sort of navigate the field of education.
Well, I mean, so much gold. Hold on. There's so much in there that I love. So thank you. And so let's go back to something you said early on when you were losing the love for learning. And I say this all the time. I've done several podcasts on, and again, I feel like the education system, the way that it is, especially in the United States, for the most part, it's not even about learning, right? It's about getting a grade, right? That we're just, I always say it to my students, to my clients, even CEOs that I coach, is like, are we really looking, are we always just looking for an answer, or can we craft a better question? Can we challenge ourselves by asking a better question, even at the top, right? Even the CEOs of these Fortune 500 companies, right? Is that you got to have a vision, but in order for us to get there, man, you've got to empower the people around you to be the best version of them, right? And I mean, that's literally why I get the phone call, is because they're like, okay, I'm not doing this, right? And it's fun, but I want to go back because, so when you're losing, again, so we have people out there right now that are listening that I know feel that same way. Like, I really, truly believe, and I write this every day, so that's probably why I believe it, that one of my superpowers is that I have a willingness to learn, like no matter what. So no situation scares me. I mean, not in the way that I won't do it, because I know that, or fear for that matter, is I just know that, well, if I'm willing to learn, that there is no real true end point. Because even if it doesn't happen, right? We launch Optimal Self and it doesn't do well, right? Or it doesn't hit the people the way I want it to. Well, maybe we got to craft a new message, right? I got to be willing to learn and understand. So for you, going from that, losing the love for learning, and then transforming it into now, like, you love, I mean, again, like just watching and hearing you, like, how does that transition? How do you recognize that? And then how do you get back to being very learning based, even for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You remind me of something. I think there's a really big difference between learning and schooling. So I guess when I say, I guess I didn't fall out of love with learning, I fell out of love with the concept of school, which I think, and I think we equate those two things. We equate school with learning. And that's where I think we really struggle to be able to differentiate, what lights us up in those different ways. Because to your point, school really it's a series of steps you're going through, getting the grade, doing what needs to be done. And that's not learning, right? Learning is personal. Learning is diverse. Learning happens everywhere all the time, not just within these time blocks and, only during this part of the day. So I think, that would be the first big differentiation, would be this difference between learning versus school. And I think the other thing is taking the time to reflect and actually want to make a change for yourself. It would have been really easy for me to switch careers, which I thought about. Maybe I'm just going to get out of education and maybe I'm going to go pursue a different pathway or a different career. Or I remember that time I had friends who were in all these different industries and, I thought about going back to school for like something else. But then there's that moment of like, okay, but what is the real problem here? Right? Is the problem like just getting another job? Like, is that all you're trying to do? Or maybe is there another way of looking at this? And that's why I feel like reading and reflecting and really taking a moment to journal and just think about like, okay, like what is making me happy? What am I enjoying? What isn't working? Why isn't something working? And those types of things lead you then, I'd say the biggest realization I had was that this is not personal, because it's really hard when you're a new graduate, right? And you're just gotten your first job and now all of a sudden you get a layoff notice. And even though everybody tells you like, oh no, it's not you, like you had great evaluations and, you're so wonderful. And, I'm going to write you like a glowing letter of recommendation. You still, I feel like on like deep down, like there is this insecurity, like maybe I'm not good enough. Right? Like maybe if I was better, maybe I would have been able to stay somehow. And so I think battling with sort of those personal insecurities versus your vision, your goals, and being able to sort of find a way to make a place for yourself. And that's what Linchpin taught me, was how do you make a place for yourself? So I could have changed industries, but ultimately, if I hadn't learned how to make a place for myself within any of those industries or fields, I probably would have ended up with the same problems. So I think it's that taking that time to pause, that time to reflect can really help you get to the root of like what it is that's challenging. And then when you're at the root of something, you're in a better position really to be able to solve for it.
Oh my gosh, you're after my heart with everything that you just said. I'll give you this because I don't think we've ever spoke on this. We have 6 principles at Optimal Self. It's hydrate, which because your brain is over 90% water, your bones, muscles, I could go through all of it. Why? But most people live in a form of dehydration. So none of the control mechanisms, none of the operating systems inside our body, meaning your brain, it works at a high level if it's dehydrated, right? Most people are getting up, they're having coffee. So so it goes. No, I drink coffee. I'm not saying don't drink coffee. The people always say that. No, I love. I mean, you should see my house. I have beans from all over the world and I crush them myself and I make fresh. But the first thing every day is 18 to 24 ounces Himalayan sea salt and lemon before anything else goes in. That's all. Just a precursor, right? But it's hydrate, right? Breathe, which in the world I call it breathing because that's what gets me through in the meditation aspect, right? Getting my mind right is that I never was great at meditation. Like when I sit there, because my mind, I'm that high D personality where it's just like spinning out of control. Like I'm thinking, what else should I be doing right now? Right. And so, but when I focused on my breathing, I'm able to bring myself and center myself. And what I found is that literally there's studies all over, which is incredible, which one of our principles shows that in literally 9 quality breaths in certain patterns can literally change your state. So if you're angry, mad, jealous, whatever you're going through, you can literally change your state. So breathing, but meditation is how it kind of goes out, right? Then we have move, and I purposely don't say exercise because people look at me and they go, Jeremy, I don't want to look like that. Like, why do your biceps so big, right? I'm like, no, you don't have to, I'm not saying you have to do anything like that, but movement is important, right? And so, and again, what I just said about hydrate, breathe, and move, all 3 of those are better for your brain than anything else. And literally, and that's the control, right? And then we get to write, which is what you just said is number 4, which everyone talks about journaling. So, and the reason, again, I say write is because, look, you don't have, it doesn't matter what you write. Like, just get it out. What's in your head, it doesn't have to make sense on the page. It doesn't have to look beautiful. It just needs to get out. And the more I do it, the better I get. And we have different prompts and stuff. And then we have read, and then we have intention. And the reason why intention is 6 is because nothing in life happens without purpose or intentionality. And so if we can train people. So I mean, you made reference to it. And so I know our audience is, they hear me talk about it all the time, but it's so much better to hear somebody more educated than I am, way more advanced than I am, talk about how has that helped you? Because again, moving into the world and even creating what you're creating today, I gotta imagine, I mean, I have them all over the place. Like, I gotta imagine there's pages and pages of things that you've written to get the thoughts out, to then get them together to build what you're building.
I'm going to show you, just because they're literally on all sides. It's like here, it's here. It's like literally here. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And the reason it's everywhere is because you don't get that, like, it literally, you just said it. You can't get that clarity just in one session. It's not like you sit down to journal and all of a sudden all these magical answers come out. But what does happen is you get clarity when ideas come outside of your head. Ideas that are in your head are overwhelming, they're heavy, and they're a weight. And when you can take them outside of your head and put them anywhere, really, whether it's a Post-it note, it doesn't even have to be the medium of writing, because I think a lot of times when we talk about journaling, everybody assumes that you need to have a pen and paper and a notebook, which could be great for you. But I actually found, once, we started, different mediums became more sort of, democratized. I actually found that video really, really helped me. And so a lot of times, like, you'll notice, like, if you follow me on Instagram, I have these like stories sometimes that are like too long. I'll have, like, sometimes people tell me like, wow, you should really keep your stories to like this and this. And I'm like, yeah, I actually do that more for me. And if somebody else is listening, like, great, I hope it helps you too. But a lot of times it's my outlet. It's my creative outlet. And being able to just get those ideas out of your head gives you this subconscious clarity, I feel, to be able to just better guide you, to better direct you when it comes time to making decisions. There's just these insights that you have that you didn't like make a list of because you sat down to journal one day, but there's these insights that come from the practice of engaging in those things. So it can be any medium. It can be drawing, it can be video, it can be writing, as long as you have an outlet for your ideas and for what's in your head.
Wow, that's a great point. That's pure gold. Everybody, if you're wherever you're at listening to this, look at the time on the screen and go back and hear that again, because that's such a great point. I do lives for our group, our private group, and it's literally me like this live, where I just, obviously I've done research that the day or the week, and there's just a thought, or there's just sometimes it's a quote or a word, just something that really sparks something, and I do them. And you're right. That's such a good point. I never really thought about it, but I think they're more therapeutic for me than probably, I mean, it's cool when people come back and they're like, oh my God, that was great. Thank you. I needed to hear that today. But it's like what you just said. I think it's even more therapeutic for me in that moment. So I think that's something for people to really take down and implement. Like, doesn't matter the medium, just do it, just get it out. And
it doesn't even have to be public. Like, I know I said Instagram stories, but like, on our phones, we have like voice memos or like audio record. Like, I don't know what the version is on Android, but on iPhone, you've got voice memos. Like, you've got your notes app. Like, you can dictate into anything and it will write it up as text. So you just have so many options for how you want to share whatever's in your head that, find what works for you.
Yeah, that's well said. Well said. One of the things that I did want to, because I have very few people that I actually meet, when I ask them and I say, hey, what's your mission? Or, and on yours, it says, my mission is simple: to design schools that give young people the mindset and skills they need to thrive in workplaces and as global citizens. So can you go a little deeper? I mean, I want to really dig into, one, why do you believe, why even put the mission out there? But then what is it about designing and giving young people the mindset and skills? Like, where does that come from for you? And how important is that mission to you?
Yeah, a lot of this, like I said, comes from, and I'm still on this journey, like there's by no means like an endpoint, but it really came from, like I said, this transition from being a learner to then being a person in the world of work, right? What school is preparing you for, and then having learners in front of me and navigating the world of work myself, but also having the responsibility of preparing the people in front of me for what they were about to go into. And so one of the reasons I'm really explicit with that mission is because a lot of times in schools, and this had been my experience, I think really in, technology has been around for a long time, but I think where we really saw it just explode is when the iPad came out and we started to see more and more places go one-to-one than had ever been before. There had definitely been some laptop programs and things like that, but the tablet, the mobile device really changed the dynamic of what was possible from a cost perspective, from a, just an efficiency perspective and whatnot. And I remember when this first started happening, our focus was the technology. What new app are we going to be learning? Like what can you do with the tool versus what type of learning experience do we want to create? And so what you realize in that dynamic is you get excited by a tool because it's what excites you, but you may or may not really be solving for a particular problem or a particular challenge. In this case, yes, we were introducing lots of technology, and unfortunately, this is something that still happens, yet the actual foundations of the learning environment and the learning experience are not changing. We're really just doing a lot of fancy substituting with devices versus really trying to reimagine and redesign. And so, as again, just like a very avid reader, always reading, always listening to see what I can learn, I was listening to a talk with Erik Brynjolfsson, it was Mark Benioff, and a few other panelists at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And it was like my first time learning about this conference. It just so happened this was the first talk I was watching. And the talk was titled Technology-Driven Human-Centered. And I remembered one very specific line from Erik Brynjolfsson in there. He said, technology does not shape technology is not destiny. We shape our destiny. And it just was like this really profound statement. I was like, oh, wow, like how do we shape our destiny? And so that really sort of became like, I almost took it as like a call to action. And so a really big part of my research and looking into like, okay, how do we prepare people to shape their destiny using the technology and resources that we have access to today? And how do you increase that access and exposure so that everybody's able to benefit from it? And that's what led me to learning about design thinking. And the reason I specifically call out mindset and skills is that it's not just about the skills. Like, yes, you can be creative. Yes, you can be collaborative. Yes, all these things to these skills. But if you don't have the mindset to navigate ambiguity, to own your creative confidence, to lean into empathy as you're designing and as you're creating and as you're doing these different things, then you're missing half of the equation. And I think the mindset piece is one that is just so deeply missing from our schools. It's one, I mean, I don't know about you, but like I didn't grow up with mindset things like how to build my creative confidence or how to even believe in myself sometimes. Everything in school comes down to A, B, C, D, F, right? You fall onto this bell curve where you're told you're a number, which to be honest, didn't really change much even once I became a professional. It was still like, well, you're going to get a layoff notice because, you're not tenured yet and you fall on this number in the scale. And so when you're brought up in that way, you really don't learn what's great about you outside of something that's actually gradable on a numeric dashboard. And there's so much more to humans and people than obviously, a grade can ever tell you. And so that's why the mindset component to me is so important in being able to learn to advocate for yourself and to believe in yourself, which is the foundation of being able to take advantage of any of the opportunities we see in today's world.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things, I mean, obviously, you and I have followed each other now for a couple of years. And when I read that, let's be clear. I want all the people out there to know, because this is just a conversation of two friends. And so what sparked me with you was the post, and it said, "I'm leaving, I resigned from Apple," and you pull your shirt off and it's got a different shirt on, and you're like, I'm starting. And I was like, oh, you know what I mean? Because again, here's this massive company, and knowing your education and what you're doing and all this, and like the technology. And as I again read deeper, to be like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? I can't wait to hear. I can't wait to follow. Right. And then when you had mindset, I've had several educators or people in this, on the podcast, and it's one of the things that I always ask, and very rarely do they open with that. And on yours, it says mindset even before it says skills, because everybody has to acquire skills. We have to be learning. There's no question, right? We have to get better. But what we fail to realize, and I think this happens a lot of times, is we don't go after how we think about ourselves, not just about this. I wonder if I have one in my pocket. I want to share this with you. No one even knows. This is going to be the first time ever seen it. And so I'll give you a little background, because
okay.
And I want to. And so you'll see this coin. Right?
Okay.
So this coin, I was giving a speech. I got a company brought me in to speak at Zoom. Of course, it was about 6-7 months ago, and somebody on the call they're building this company, great company, great work. I mean, the people that were on there, just how I'm sure you do them, and just the level of questions, like, always just gets my heart, man. Like, when they ask great questions, it's not like just, so how do I become the best version of me, Jeremy? I'm like, okay. But when they dig in, so a guy asked me about belief. He says, how do you coach and teach somebody to believe in themselves, right? Like, that's a big thing, right? How do you, because again, depending on your upbringing, depending on where you are, from parents to teachers to cousins, aunts, uncles, neighbors, right? We've consumed all of this information from the time, right? We're little. What we don't realize is now we're adults, and all of that is what's playing in the background. And we have to somehow understand and reprogram. And so in this case, they were talking about, like, hey, yes, we're putting this plan in place. We have the systems in place, right? And so I was like, oh, this is great. So I'm gonna give it to you. I said, belief is a two-sided coin. The one side, and you're gonna see this, I'll show it to you. And the people, if you're listening to this, go to the YouTube channel and you'll see it, because I want you to see it. So it's that. See, optimal self-belief.
Right.
Process and plan, right? On this side of the coin. And so I asked them, I said, tell me this, anyone on this call, and the system is in place. You guys have a plan for the future, for the next 5 years, right? Yes. How many of you believe if that plan is executed at the highest level that all of you are capable of, do you believe that plan will get you where you want to go? I mean, every head is everyone is nodding. I said, if somebody doesn't disagree, it's okay. It's not right or wrong. Just say it. And they're like, no, it's good. Like, that plan, if we execute that at a high level. I said, great. Here's the problem, is that all of you are stuck on this side of the coin. You're stuck in the process, the plan, and the system. And you believe it. Man, 100%, Jeremy, believe it. I said, but here's the thing. Do you believe, you personally, that you are deserving, worthy, and capable of those results? Right? I'm always the guy that gets the call and says, hey, I want to take our company from 10 million to 100 million. Hey, I want to make my first million. You're like, okay, I got a blueprint for just about any business there is. I do. And it's fun and I love it. And I can show you the plan. But how many people don't truly believe they are worthy, capable, or deserving of those results, of truly having that life, whatever that life is that they choose? I say that to you because this coin was born out of that, because I didn't have the coin when I gave that speech. I said there's just two sides to the coin. And afterward, the CEO, who I had never met, I was hired by somebody else. The CEO sends me a message, text message, and says, "Do you have a coin? I want one of those coins." And I was like, shoot, I don't even have a coin, right? And so I get online and I start researching, right? And next thing you know, within less than 30 days, I found the person, they called it, they did it. I had a couple consultations and we literally built this out of thin air.
Wow.
Now when we coach and when I teach and when I talk about it, because it goes back to what you said, though, it's the mindset is that so many times we believe that these skills, right, that these skills are going to get us where we want to go, that I'm coming out and I want to get this great job, or I want to build this great company. Maybe I want to start my own company, whatever. Or you just want to work for this company because you believe in their mission and you believe in it. But yet I might believe wholeheartedly in your mission. Like I see it, but do I believe that I am worthy and capable and deserving of those results, of whatever it is? If it's a monetary thing, that's fine. If it's a weight loss thing, like a lot of people call for, they want to get healthy and things like that. So what is your take on that? I mean, I know I said a lot there, but I would love to get your feeling. Like, again, the system, the process, building the skills is on one side, but the other side is, do we believe in us, right? Do we believe that we're worthy?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll kind of build a little bit then on what you shared, because I think you paint a picture of how so many people respond to things today. To your point, these CEOs, these are well-accomplished people, like people who have probably done well in their careers, who are ambitious, who have goals, who have dreams, as do all human beings, right? And I think where the challenge lies is, like you said, do you believe in yourself? So, kind of examining, okay, but where does that root cause come from? Like, why do so many of us in the world struggle with this? And you really, you have to at least ask the question. I remember it didn't occur to me actually even until during the pandemic. It was so easy to join any webinar, any session, anything. And I joined this one. It was the intro webinar for a course that Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi were doing. And I really enjoy, especially Dean Graziosi, just a huge fan, love following his work. And so I was like, oh, wow, I can't wait to join this webinar. And I couldn't even focus on the webinar because I was so fascinated by people's comments and what was even happening. It was essentially people just needed to be told, yes, you can. People just needed to hear a voice that would tell them they were capable of doing something. And it was fascinating to me. And you begin to wonder, well, why do so many people struggle with this? And if you think back to the one thing that we all kind of share in common, it's having gone through 12 years or more of being told that you are just a number. Our grading system telling us what you are and are not good at. And there are so many things back, to your point, that we are good at that cannot be reflected through the ways in which we assess people at a very, very, very young age. Formative years, where you're developing that sense of identity, where you're developing that sense of confidence. To have been told, even me, I always tell the story of how I was not good at writing. When I used to love, when I was in London, storytelling and writing, I was doing it all the time, all day long. And when we came here, it was just these really boring reading comprehension, and just everything was so robotic. I really kind of didn't do very well in writing, those essays where you had to write something off of a book, and all of that just wasn't I don't know, I just didn't do well. And so I remember always thinking, even as an adult, even till this day, you'll hear me say I'm not a good writer. And, but I've got a doctorate. So people will be like, well, wait a minute, you've done research and you've done this and that. But I tell people this is how it happened. I actually worked at USC, which is where I went to school to get my doctorate. And if I had done it while I was there, I would have saved 50% on cost. So this is sometimes just how much fear And a lack of that mindset can cost you, no matter who you are or what situation you're in. And I was so scared that I wouldn't get accepted and it would look really bad around everybody I was working with. I was like, oh my God, I just looked at the essay questions and I was like, I can't do this. And I shut it. And it wasn't until one of my mentors came along, I was like, you know what? We're going to write it together. And I was like, okay, but I don't think they're going to accept me. He's like, we're going to write it together. So sometimes, like, even somebody like me who understands mindset, believes in this, you need to have those people around you who are going to encourage you and can highlight for you when you are falling into those patterns. And so we did, and we sat down and we wrote it together, and I got in there. And now when I pay those, student loan bills, I'm just like, I could have had half of this amount. And so it's just a really powerful reminder. But I think, to your point, I think today we are examining this. The grading system has not just caused, I think, people to lose a lot of confidence and not really recognize what they're great at, but it's caused a huge mental health crisis, the stress, the anxiety, all the challenges that come about as a result of the pressure that we're putting on young people today. For what? How many of us really ended up doing what we said we thought we were going to do senior year of high school? Nobody. All of our careers take different trajectories and different pathways, and there's more opportunity to kind of go and pivot and go through different pathways today than ever before. So this idea that we're putting all this stress and anxiety and pressure on people at a young age and really not instead building up their mindset to explore, to experiment, to take those risks, to be creative, and to find what really brings that spark within them. It's such a missed opportunity, and one that I hope that people are excited to do something about and excited to just kind of see where we can take things.
I love it. So on that side, because we have a lot of one of our hashtags is generational habits, and I talk a lot about, and so we get a lot of parents is why. So I want to stay on that thread with you for a second, because you made reference to building that mindset with our children. But I'll give you a little context around it is, studying, I've always been real estate is my forte, thousands of houses, over 300 flipped, syndications, it's what I'm really, really good at over time, because I built it and I didn't know anything when I started. But today it's a lot different. And I talk about generational wealth is talked a lot about, especially in the US. And as you look and you study generational wealth, you learn that most of it is gone by the second, and if not the third generation, that it's gone, that the wealth is no longer, it's completely depleted. Or a lot of very wealthy families handed down by the second and third generation, it's gone. And it's attributed because the habits that it took to build that wealth are not handed down, just the wealth is handed down. I call it the lottery winner effect, right? Most lottery winners go broke or even commit suicide because they don't know how to handle it. They've never had that kind of money. They don't know what to do. And again, they go back to their same habits. So if you live on $10,000 a month and then you have $100,000 a month, you live on $100,000 a month. And so they don't have the habits. They don't build the habits. So one of the things that we talk a lot about, that I talk a lot about, is generational habits. Not generational wealth is great, handed down. Yes, I want those young, great grandchildren to go, great Grandpa Jeremy left us those buildings, and you know what I mean? Whatever, like, cool. But I'm more interested in handing down the habits, the thought process, the mindset that will propel them to have whatever they want in this world, rather than have to depend on even some wealth that I may be able to hand down at some point. So, but you made reference to it, and that's what sparked this interest for me, was building these schools, now designing schools, and what you're doing. How is there something that the listener, that these parents that I know tune in, that we can help them with? Like, are there any things, tactics that you're using, or that, that we should be focused on that can help these kids, break out of that. You're not just a grade on a on a report card or a number. You are more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's where like the design thinking practices can really come into play. I'll share maybe like two things that I think are like immediate things. If you wanted to get up and do them right now, you could at home. Like obviously, like you're not going to doing things in a school is like more systematic, but there are definitely like, I'll share two things that I just really, really, really love. The first one is language, right? Like how we talk about things, how we break things down, and how we teach this idea of reflection. It's not like, you think about like the kid who we all have that experience, right? Like we all got those report cards where we didn't do well and then we're scared to take it home, or like we're forging signatures, and whatnot. And so it's like, you think about the conversation. Okay, well, what does that number really even mean, right? Like why do you feel you didn't do well? Let's look, you got an A over here, but you got this over here. Like let's talk about what were the different environments like, what were the different experiences like, being able to break that type of language down. And even if it's something that you're not doing well on, being able to say like, I can't do that yet. And it was one of the things that I remember was, it was really interesting. Like my nephew, like a lot of times, like he would try something new and then he'd be like, I can't do it. I can't do it. No, I can't do it. Like you do it, you do it. And it's like, no, you can't do it yet. But how are we going to try in that? And it's so much easier to actually just do it for him, and just be like, hey, here, give it to me. I'll do it. But I think having the patience, it's something that I think I tell my sister and brother-in-law all the time. I admire that in them so much. The way like they have this patience to just like sit back and just wait for him to be able to get through what it is that he's doing so that he can come to it at his own time. And being able to then reinforce those moments like, okay, like, look, you made this much progress now. I think that really helps. I think a second thing that really helps is being able to just document, right? Like if you think about learning to read or write for the first time, you kind of look at like, okay, like this is where I started on day one, but wow, like a few months later, look at how much you've grown. Again, that reflection on the process is the part that I think is missing for so many of us growing up, that we're just, seeing what happens like at that given moment. Like, oh, I got an A here, I got this here, like, oh, and that, without the reflection, it's hard to have that gap. So there's actually one company, they're called the Big Life Journal, and they just have such incredible prompts for kids to be able to, like, from young kids all the way up to teenagers, to be able to really just have that dialogue. Again, if like you're a parent, like I feel like I follow them on Instagram, but I just love the posts that they share. The other one that I really, really love, and this is, we do this a lot as adults, right? These personality tests or these assessments and whatnot. You don't see us do it enough for kids. It's not enough to just say like, oh, you're great at art or you're great at this, but really when we break down mindsets and skills, being able to really get specific with our language not only allows other people that are interacting with kids to know these are their skills and strengths, but gives kids the language to understand what's unique about them and the language to articulate it, which I think is key. And so there's a platform and it's called Thrively. And Thrively, it can be used in schools. You can use it as a parent, as an individual. But what Thrively does is this, they partnered with a neuroscientist to actually develop an assessment that's similar to, say, like the Clifton Strengths or, like one of those types. And what it does is it builds like a learner profile, and it tells the kids, these are your strengths in these different areas. But the language that it gives to articulate is beautiful. Like as a kid, you can use that language. And so I think just knowing where your strengths are, and also knowing that you're not going to have a strength in every single category. We're all great at something, but we can't be great at everything. And that understanding is the foundation for great collaboration. We talk about how essential collaboration is today, but ego so often comes in the way. And the reason I think it does for so many of us is we've all been taught to believe there's only one winner. There's only one valedictorian. There's only one everything. And so when you grow up in an environment where there's only one of those things, it's really hard now to take a step back and say, this isn't just about me. This is about us, because together we're going to, do X. That is a hard mindset shift to overcome. It's great if you're just doing a little project here and there, but really when you want to get into that deep collaboration, having the confidence, this is what I'm great at that I'm bringing to the table, and X, Y, Z, and for everybody else, and how we're building something that's ours and together is transformational, yet an incredibly difficult process, I think, for many people to go through.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Again, those of you listening, go back, just rewind and listen to that again, because language is so important. And I'll say it, you know, it's crazy as we have children, right, and the people around us, and we can be very aware of the language that we use with them, right? And sometimes we're not. I mean, that's kind of the problem. But the ones that are, like you said, like your sister and brother-in-law, like chances are they're very aware of the language. The people that are in, you know, the design thinking way is that, yeah, we're very aware. But what I also want people to hear because when you say that, I think of, for ourselves, like the language that we're using for ourselves. Can you imagine? Because this is part of my life. You said, I can't do that yet, you know, with children or whatever. And mine was, I'm not good enough yet. So I don't know if you've probably heard the story. When I was 13, you know, the coach told me I wasn't good enough and I didn't make the all-star team and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, always in my head, I was just like, you can say, oh, I'm not good enough. And then you don't pick up another bat or a ball, or you don't pursue whatsoever. And I had the exact opposite, right? I was like, yo, no one's ever going to tell me that again. Like, not from lack of effort, right? Like, I haven't put in the time, energy, and effort, so I don't deserve it. Once I know that I can learn and I can get better, that, you know, there are going to be some stumbling blocks and I may not be good enough yet. So I love that. And I hope people take that, but using that language, not just, again, the optimal self, I say this all the time. You cannot help somebody else until you help yourself. Yeah. So we can't be teaching and leaving generational habits if we haven't built those habits, if we haven't changed that own language in our own mind. And it's not perfect. I am guilty as charged. It happens all the time where I'm like, oh man, is this good enough? Should I, shouldn't I? Right? Even times before I hit play, like I'm sure when you're getting ready to do a story, right? And I'm like, should I not? Am I ready? Oh shoot, am I ready? Let me look back at the notes. Like, you know what I mean? We question it. So again, I think language and understanding that, but I love how you said, looking at the environment and the experience as well. So, you know, because we're all guilty of that. I would, you know, parent, and the kid comes home with, you know, 3 A's, a B, and a C. And what do we always say? Well, what's up with the C? How come we didn't? You know what I mean? It's like, instead of going, wow, let's talk about those 3 A's. What's that? Who cares? The C, we'll figure it out. But what about these 3 A's? What about that experience? What about that environment? What did you love about that subject, class, teacher, whatever? Like, and then we start to bring those feelings up. And then maybe we can raise that environment and experience in those other grades. So I think language is important. And document, I mean, I teach this every day to business owners, is like, look, if you don't track it, there's no way to improve it. Yeah. None, zero. You cannot improve what you don't track. And it's really fun to look back and go, wow, look how far I've come. Yeah. I'm not nearly where I want to go, but look what I've actually done. So, I mean, thank you for sharing that. Big Life Journal, Thrively. You guys get out there, research it, look for it, right? Like all super amazing things. There's something that I think is important as well. And so I have a few, I don't even know what you would call them, mantras, I guess. I'm going to give it to you. And I only want to focus on one with you, but mine are: one, sharpen your axe. That goes back from, Abraham Lincoln. They said, if you gave me 4 hours to chop down the tree, I'd spend the first 3 sharpening my axe, right? Like, you got to fall in love with the process. Sharpen your axe. Just keep sharpening your axe. Don't worry about the result. Don't worry about what the actual task at hand is. Sharpen your axe. Get better, get better, get better. I also say every day, just take one step. Just take one step. Every great thing starts with a streak, and you got to get started. A streak can only start with you get started. So take one step. I'll give you the last one. I always say shoot or shoot. I say that a lot. I hashtag that a lot as well, because look, Jordan would have never made a shot if he didn't take the damn shot, right? Like, not when he felt like it, not when he was wide open, not when the perfect, everything with the elements were great. No, just take the dang shot and see what happens, you know? And then one of mine is always relentless consistency, because if you're not, I mean, that's really the truth of success is you got to be consistent. You got to be and you got to be relentless at consistency. But the one I want to bring with you is in one of my mantras is embracing delayed gratification. And I think with the technology side, and you're really heavy in this side, so that's why I really wanted to come to this with you, is because with technology today, we can literally get answers at the touch of a button or the sound of our voice, like, and they come very quickly. And there's Dr. Andrew Huberman, who talks a lot of, he's neuroscience, dopamine and how it all, and he says, like, the problem we have today is that you get these dopamine hits without any effort. And so dopamine literally should be more towards the motivation side, is like when I actually do something and I earn it, I get that feeling and I'm like, oh yeah, this feels great, right? Where today we actually get those feelings without actually doing anything. I can literally just pick up my phone and make a smile post, and all these people start starring it, highlighting it, commenting, and I get all this wonderful thing that people now, whatever. But my point is that with you knowing as much about technology, like how do we eliminate that immediate gratification where we get these hits so easily? How, again, I teach this every day, like literally, I'm like, okay, let's start with, you better start embracing delayed gratification, that you're going to do a lot of work for a long time before you ever hit mastery or the numbers that you want. So where do you see that? And how, I mean, I'd just love your take in general on it.
Yeah, I mean, oh wow, it's definitely a complex one. I mean, I'm definitely not a neuroscientist by any means, where I'd be able to say like, this is what you do, so you're going to be able to balance those sort of like chemical reactions and whatnot. I will say maybe a few things just from my own personal experience, and also taking us back to the reflecting and the journaling. One of the things that I found happened through journaling and through documenting, like just my own journey and my own journey and what I was doing personally and professionally, gave me language and confidence to talk to myself. Because a lot of times those comments that those things that we're referring to when we post them can be just as positive as they can be negative. When you share something, or you put a project, or you put something out into the world, you're going to get the people who are going to support you and the people who are going to tell you like, oh, you sure you want to do that? Maybe you should just stay where you are. You're doing so well. I mean, the number of people who told me that I should just stay in my job because like, oh, well, you're at Apple, and whatnot. It's just a double-edged sword. The positive can help, but there's also the negative to deal with. And in both scenarios, what helps keep you grounded is the way in which you speak to yourself. So if you understand that those comments can bring both the joy and both pain and doubt and fear and ignite, I feel like, while the dopamine hit from the positive things dies down very quickly, I will say the negative ones and the ones that place doubt don't ever leave. And in both scenarios, you have to be prepared to be able to take a step back and really refine that voice in your head that is grounding you in a bigger why. Because I mean, there's just so many layers to this, because it's also like the way in which we teach these platforms, or maybe lack thereof, in terms of what they can do. It's really easy to see the people who get the likes and the comments and whatnot. But one of the things that I also say that we really are missing in our sort of like education system, we teach this concept of like entrepreneurship or following your strengths or following your passion, but it really has to also be aligned with building a strong financial model for how you're going to sustain yourself, right? You've got to make money. It's not just about going out and following your passion and just, getting likes and comments. Ultimately, if that's not bringing you, money to sustain or pay your bills or to build it like an actual life out of, you very quickly will realize that it's not, something that's going to, support you and help you. So I think having just that balanced approach But again, so much of that goes down to mindset. Like you think about teens, like I didn't follow like word for word to be able to quote it. But I mean, I feel like Instagram was just, in hearings with Congress about the impact that their platform has on the mental health of young people. And it's a double-edged sword. It's not just Instagram. It's not just schools. It's sort of, our lack of being able to keep up and raise people in this society with an understanding of, okay, here are these tools. Here's what you can do with them. But let's also assess these and, take a more critical look at the impact they're having and how we're teaching it and how we're preparing people. So there's so many layers that go into that one question. But if I had to break it down all into one, I would say you've got to have a strong why. At the end of the day, like you said, right? Like whether this works, whether it doesn't, I've learned something. I say that about my podcast. I say that about any project that I'm working on. If it is able to have a ripple effect, even to just a few other people, that's great. But ultimately, I benefit so much from these. When I sit down to record a podcast, when I sit down to record a video, there's no one liking or commenting until much later in the process, right? And so being able to find what intrinsically motivates you to get to that place comes from, like, if you had that growing up, you just have more time to understand. And I think that's really what we advocate for. Is before, I always talk about this, like I, a couple years ago, read Thank You for Being Late by Thomas Friedman. And chapter 2 of his book is called What the Hell Happened in 2007. And I was like, that's what I used to ask. Like, what the hell happened in 2007? And you read that book and you realize, like, wow, I was struggling. And I was and it wasn't just me, many people were struggling during that time, dealing with layoffs and all these other economic hardships. But at the same time, 2007 is the year that the iPhone launched. 2007 is the year that we saw platforms like Facebook and Twitter emerge. YouTube became much more, popular. Airbnb launched that year. IBM started Watson AI. So you've got two different groups of people. You've got people who are, going through hardships because they were not prepared, and people who were able to capitalize on change and what was happening. And so there's this one quote that I refer to often. It's by author William Gibson. And he says, the future is here. It just isn't evenly distributed. And so a lot of this is really being able to contextualize these things in terms of a much bigger picture of what your goals are and the intrinsic motivation that you have for why you're doing these things to begin with. Because to go back to your point, to get to that point where you're going to get sort of those comments, those likes, those shares that are actually going to lead to like a financial model for something that you're building, there's a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't see. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, okay.
Well, it is, because it's delayed gratification, right? Is that everything that you said is delayed. Even a podcast, even this right now, right? People are going to hear this weeks, if not a month or so later, than you and I having this conversation, and you and I, again, getting some benefit from right now, but we won't know the outcome until a much later date, which is a really, really good point, I think. And I love, that position of, well, one, when you're building something, coming from a strong financial position and knowing the economic model that you're going to need to follow and how to get there. That's an important piece. When you say why, I always like to use words that people can get. So, purpose, intention, like all of those things are they work, whatever works for you individually. And I tell my people that all the time, like I need to, why Simon Sinek talks about, you got to have your why. And I don't really understand why, and I'm like, okay, it's purpose. It's passion. It's intention. And I'll go even deeper a little bit, because, and you made reference to it a little bit earlier when you said the sense of identity. And I think with why and purpose is when we can attach it and we can make it our identity, like that is, it changes everything. And I got interviewed for Personal Growth Magazine about a month ago, and they asked me that question, like, when did it change for you? And I said, well, everything changed for me the day that I actually wrote my personal mission, like the day that I wrote it down, because my mission is to help and inspire people to change behavior through belief and action so they can be the best version of themselves. And so again, when I isolate it and I say, okay, people must change behavior. So everybody listening, you can, again, interchangeable words right there, habits, behavior, whatever. But if you don't change something you do, you're going to keep getting the same results. Like, right, insanity, we all know all that. But it's true, and we don't really realize that. And so how do I change behavior? Well, I change it in two ways. I change it through my belief system. Well, guess what my belief system is tied to? Well, it's tied to my identity. Well, guess where that came from? Probably I was 7 when somebody told me I wasn't good enough. And so now I've been fighting, you know what I mean? Like we can go down these roads. But I think, you know, again, when you talk about that intrinsic motivation, is that because people ask me all the time, they're like, Jeremy, how are you so disciplined? I'm like, I don't even think I'm that disciplined. They're like, no, you get up and you work out and you make your own meals, you're on time, you do this. And like, you are the most disciplined person I know. And honestly, I don't even think about it. It's not even a thought. And so when I get that question, when I got that question and I started to reverse engineer it a little bit, and I'm like, that's really interesting that people see me like that, right? They see me as this really disciplined human. And I wouldn't necessarily say that about myself. And so then when I reverse engineer it, I'm like, oh, it's because that's the identity of Jeremy that I've created. I created that guy. I created him. It's not my mom. It's nobody else does it. Like it's none of that. But at some point I was like, because I'm the guy that I don't miss workouts. I don't miss exercising. I don't eat out. I know I love good food. Don't get me wrong. But in my normal life, not traveling and having amazing meals and having 5-star, like, no, look, I love it. I love it. Don't get me wrong. Give me that great bottle of wine. I am in all day long. But in my everyday life, I don't do it. It's not who I am. I don't miss. I do it the way I do it because I want to feel good. I want my brain to operate. That's my biggest thing. My cognitive function has to be level 10 all the time. And by doing those other things, it doesn't happen. So is there something for you, like in your why, in your mission, in your purpose? What gives you that intrinsic motivation? How do you stay motivated to do? I mean, you're embarking on something revolution. I mean, honestly, like that is literally going to change lives for decades, probably even after you're gone. Like,
no, I hope so.
It will. You're way too special of a human for it not to. So, and you're so, I mean, again, everything I've watched, like everything you've done, you said you're going to do it and boom, you go do it. And then it keeps getting better and better and better, which shows, again, I say it all the time in Optimal Self. These people are gonna be like, Jeremy says, I don't like, is that every next level of your life takes a new you. So you've got to get better, right? Like there is no, you said it before, this isn't a destination. I'm not stopped. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to build this and then I'm good. No, it's just the next level. And then there's going to be something else and something else. But what keeps you, quote unquote, motivated, on purpose, intrinsically motivated? What is it? How do you stay there?
Wow. I wish I had like a one-word answer for you. I don't know that I do. I will say one of the things that I really advocate for, even if I just think back to like, here you are. So this is interesting, right? The same way you were like, oh, people think you're so disciplined. People think whatever. Let's say maybe somebody watching me is like, wow, she's so motivated. She's just going from like one thing to the next. And I do actually next year, I do plan on writing a little bit more about this. It's just a matter of like processing and being able to say things in the right way, in a respectful way and whatnot. It's not like I am just jumping from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, because I'm so motivated or I'm trying to get to somewhere. One of the things that I would say really, really, really helped me, which is now just going to become a theme throughout this episode, is reflecting on what I've done and how far I've come. And it's like investing in something, right? You don't see, like you mentioned, real estate. You maybe don't see the return right away. If anything, there's probably a deficit in your pocket, right? Like when you're shelling out that money or, pulling out from wherever to be able to go purchase this first thing you're investing in, no matter what it is, how big, how small. But over time, you you build that momentum, right? There is that growth, like it compounds, right? The same is true for yourself. And if you are somebody who invests in reflecting, I took this step, this is what it felt like. And it's really important to zone into those feelings. This is what it felt like, and this was the outcome. You begin to recognize what propels you forward and what holds you back. And there's no segmentation for personal and professional, because sometimes what holds you back in your professional life may propel you forward in your personal. What propels you forward in your personal may propel you in your professional. But having the awareness of how you are responding to situations allows you an opportunity to dig deeper. So for example, I am much more of a risk taker in my professional life than I ever will be in my personal life. It's the experiences I've had. It's not right or wrong, good or bad, but the awareness is critical for me when I'm making decisions. Why am I choosing to say yes to this, but no to this? How I evolve from that is an ongoing journey, but that awareness is critical. So I actually had, it's sort of like a 3 strikes and you're out, right? And I won't go into details, but I had 3 incidents that took place while I was working at Apple. First one really just kind of like caught me so off guard and was traumatic, but in a very different way. It was like right before my 1st year anniversary. But I was like, okay, you know what? Put it behind you. Like all these things, again, this is why the language, not only that other people are using with us, but the ones we're using and internalizing ourselves is so critical. And why I talk about it so much is, people will always tell you like, oh, you're doing a great job. Just put it behind you and just move on. Like don't worry about it. Like everyone will forget about it. So you do, and then you go on. And then there was a second incident. And I remember at the end of the second incident, I didn't have the confidence to really stand up for myself. And it was something that just haunted me for so long. Like, why didn't I say more? Why didn't I do X? Like all those things you think about in hindsight. And the only way you can really grow from something like that is by being able to really recognize, well, why was I so afraid to say something? I was scared of losing my job. I was, scared. What else would I do? What would I do next? And so it's really interesting now to have seen how subconsciously I perhaps was building something as a safety net or for a vision for being able to make that change, or so that next time I would be able to stand up for myself. And so the one thing I tell people is investing in your personal brand, the relationships you build, the community you build, and just the growth you see within yourself. A personal brand, and we've got to start coming up with a different name for this because I feel like it just carries a very certain image now. It's not just for people who want to start a business. This is your opportunity to carve a space in the internet, right? Like on the web for you, for who you are, to put something out there, but to build a community of people. And in that process, the things you learn about yourself and what you're capable of, and the things it prompts you to learn about doing are so transformational that you never know when you're going to be able to pull them out. And it may be something else for somebody else, but that investment of me, that investment I made in me, in my personal brand, in launching a podcast, like I wasn't getting any money from it. I wasn't getting any money from my blogs or anything at all. But that investment I made in myself, when it was the 3rd strike, it was, my confidence was unbelievable. And that video that you mentioned in the beginning is a total reflection of the confidence, of the mood, of just the everything that went into that. But it never would have happened. And I never would have had the confidence to take the step that I did had I not invested in myself and creating those pieces that may not have given me that gratification of anything else, to your point earlier, but that learning experience, that intrinsic motivation to keep creating, keep doing, to at the end of the day be in a place where I could look in the mirror and be like, wow, like I'm proud of who you are, what you stood up for, and what you did was perhaps a big part of the motivation, just being able to look at yourself in the mirror, just be proud of who you are. That would be that on sort of a deeper level. And then just on a more surface level, I love creating. I love creating. Whether it's something that I'm doing for work or whether it's something that I'm doing personally, I love creating. And I think it's something that, you said it earlier, and I wanted to say, me and you, even if this podcast never went live, not one of us would regret this time. We would both be like, oh, but oh, well, let's do it again. Let's just do it again. That's, I guarantee you, what we would both say. And so you have to look for those moments. What are those moments when you're like, oh, I would do that regardless of what happened as a result? And that's when you're onto something, and how you evolve that and how you turn it into something that can become a financial model for you, that can become a business model for you, if that's even what you want to do. There's no book that says that that's what you have to do. It's just something so that, again, you've got that diversity in the investments that you've made. But we don't always talk about ourselves as the investment. It's always sort of these outer things. But making that investment in yourself gives you more motivation, I think, than anything probably could.
Man. All right, this is the part where I'm going to rewind it and listen to that part, because that personal branding, I think, again, because it does get such a it does get a connotation in the sense of business, like, oh, you're building a business, but you don't have to do that. So, and I want everyone to hear what you said, and here's something very funny about that video, is because we're all in I saw it on Instagram, and obviously you're scrolling on Instagram. I see your name. Obviously, I have nothing but immense adoration for who you are and everything that you're doing. So, and as I'm scrolling it up and the video starts, here's what I want to tell you is I missed the words on the page because it's very quick. And I mean this because you said something there that I think is very important, is what I noticed and the reason why I stayed instead of just going to your writings, right? Or to whatever that, I don't even know what that's called, whatever the take is. So normally that's what you're going to do, right? You're just going to go down. I'm just going to read what oh man, what is she up to? Or what is she saying? But what I noticed, and you made reference to it, what I noticed was your posture, the look on your face. Like what I saw was this confident, insanely like I saw a joy in there that was like that, like the confidence joy. I mean, I don't know how to explain that, but I noticed the posture was the very first thing. Your posture, your stance, how you moved. I missed the words completely. That's what I did see. And I want everyone listening to understand this, is that what she said was, here was strike one at Apple. Here was strike two at Apple. And through these years, right, that you had been building this brand, been building it, confidence, that type of confidence is only earned with daily intrinsic movement, activity, things that are directly designed to build you. That I'm going to keep doing it. I'm not worried about the money. I'm not worried if this blog makes money. I'm not worried if this podcast makes money. I'm not that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because there's something about it that brings out the best in me, that literally I feel, right? I remember the very first one I did. I got off and it was all by myself, right? I literally had headphones in. That was my microphone. And I remember getting off in that moment and hitting end and stopping. It was a Zoom, by the way. It was a live Zoom in a Facebook group. And the whole time my heart was, and I was on like if level 10 is my normal, I was on like level 30. Like you couldn't even, like, my feet were floating. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. This is something that I want to have, and do, right? And again, I love your reflection, because I look back on those and I'm like, oh, those got to come down. Like, that's terrible. Like, what was I thinking? Oh my God. The lighting, the sound, like, I'm just like, holy cow. Anyways, my point though, to everything you just said is, I hope I hope people heard that. And it is, we all need to start investing in ourselves. We need to start investing that time into ourselves. Whether that's something that you record and no one ever sees it but you, whether it's written in a journal and you just get to dump and dump and dump and it doesn't have to make sense, is fine. Like whatever the medium is, like you have to start investing some time into yourself. And I will say, if you make it more public, meaning you're trying to add value to others' lives with the things that have happened or that you've learned, and you try to transfer that type of energy from a very, from a contribution standpoint, your life will never be the same.
It won't. And that's why I love the idea. I love that you just said that, when you make it public, because it's so hard to make it public. But when we help kids do it from a young age, they have the added advantage of that safe space of their classroom, of their teacher as their coach, as their mentor. And so you just imagine what it would be like if you didn't have to start this work in your 20s and your 30s, but you got to start it when you were 3, 4, 5. And then you had up until, you're done with school to have experimented with these things, to have put work online publicly, but in a safe space where you can make those mistakes, where you can grow, where it's not something you feel the time or pressure to build. I just feel like we would have such a different world, such a different generation of people who were really able to at least have the opportunity to recognize and decide for themselves where they want to put their energy. I feel like right now, not everyone gets that choice. If you weren't exposed to it and you didn't have access, you never get to make the choice. So I feel like people should be able to choose whatever pathway they want, but everyone should have access and exposure to the experimentation of knowing what's available and how to navigate what could be.
Yeah, well said. I couldn't agree more. I think here's the other side is it is out there, right? It is available to I mean, as far as the technology is only growing, it's only getting faster, better, more, like all the words, and we've got to be aware. And if we use it the right way, it can definitely serve us and again, serve our children, because we hear it all the time, but they're growing up in a different time, right? I mean, think about the kids today. Think about your little nephew, right? Like he's never gonna not know that he can push a button and just about anything can show up at his house. Like
he already knows that.
food, either cooked or not cooked, groceries, from toys, from books, from you. Heck, my car was delivered to my house, right? Like you don't even have to go there anymore. They just, guy drives up, came in, sat at my kitchen table, I sat at the papers, and he took an Uber home and left me a car. Like the world that we live in is truly, it's moving very quickly. And the more that we can be aware, teach it, coach to it, mentor to it, what you're doing with designing schools and design thinking is just is incredible. And so I'm super grateful for the time. I mean, I know that everybody, but we always leave, you'll see it come up, with quick hitters. And what all this is I'm asking you the same 2 words I asked everybody. And so I just want to know your take. We talked a lot about this first one, which is discipline. And how does that word hit you? What does it mean to you? And what does it mean to your life?
Discipline to me means on the days when you do not feel like doing what you should be doing, pulling those feelings. Like that's why I say when you reflect, it's not just about reflecting on action, it's reflecting on feeling. Every time I sit down to record something and I'm like, oh, but who's going to listen? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? I remember the feeling. And that feeling can become what helps build that discipline. So for me, that's it.
Well said. Love it. And the final one is impact. What impact do you want to leave? And what does impact mean to you?
I think impact means being able to open a door for somebody that they didn't even know was available to them. that if I can help open doors for people that they didn't know, the way people did for me, it was so life-changing. That to me is the greatest impact I could ever leave. Yeah.
Well, I mean, on your path, you're for sure doing that. I know the audience is better for it. So I appreciate you so much. I can't wait for our next conversation. I can't wait to see what you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll get all of everything that you're doing. We'll have in the show notes. We'll push it out there. Anything that I can do ever, please just let me know. I'm super grateful that you took the time today, and I know our audience is better for it.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So until next time, everybody, get out there and be the best version of you.